Well, we've been doing a series called The Path of Wisdom. We've been looking at this idea of what is godly wisdom, what does God tell us, and how do we live in it? The book of Proverbs is a book, perhaps you've heard Proverbs here and there, whether you were reading the Bible or just hearing them in life. But there are these incredible sayings, they're wise sayings, but the wisdom comes by not just listening to them. When the command to listen, to hear, to heed, to pay attention comes, what they mean is you would be wise if you did these things. And so we've been going through the book of Proverbs, trying to listen to why godly wisdom is important, what godly wisdom do we have, and how does it play out in real life, in our real life situations. And today we're gonna talk a little bit about the idea of friendship. What does the Bible say? What does the book of Proverbs specifically say about why we need people in our lives? What value do they bring? And when do you know you have someone of value? When do you know you're being the kind of friend that God is inviting you to be? Now, the power and influence of friends is incredible. I think it's fascinating, really. Researchers have shown that behaviors, both good and bad, spread, and forgive me for using this phrase in a time like we've just been in, like a virus, okay? We find out things, that there are ideas in which we embrace and we share together these things. I'll give you an example, and some of you can relate to this. You probably have kids like this too. Last night we had 23, I think, freshmen in high school at our house for their very first high school dance, homecoming. The girls all in these semi-formal dresses, and I think just about every girl was wearing this semi-formal dress and high-top Converse tennis shoes or Vans. Every girl. Now, and there's a part of me that's kind of the old guy, get off my lawn, like back in my day, a girl wore, but it was so fascinating that all of them had kind of the same look as when it came to shoes. Different dresses, different cuts, all those kinds of things, all had the same shoes. But it's not just simple things like that. Think about the power when you're with someone, a yawn, how it becomes contagious, a smile, how it becomes contagious. But research actually shows too that things like smoking or non-smoking, healthy eating, junk food, temperate drinking, alcoholism, civility, rudeness, pretty much any behavior you can see has the potential to spread depending on the people you are around. In his book, Live No Lies, John Mark Comer writes this. He says, the key insight here is that these phenomena spread not through an expensive marketing campaign, government legislation, or even through rational choice, but by some other, less logical, more insidious motivation. The research shows that, tends to confirm the hypothesis that human behavior clusters in both space and time, even in the absence of coercion and rationale. He says, my translation, monkey see, monkey do. We tend to resemble the people that we choose to be around. And the power of that, the Bible begins with, in God's story, talking about all the things God does in creation and how it's good. But there's a moment in which God realized that things were not good. And he says in Genesis 2 that it is not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him. Now we often just think about that only in the context of marriage, but anyone who's ever experienced loneliness knows that the concept of being alone, it's rather difficult. The power of relationship. And that word there that God says that he'll provide a helper, it's the same word he uses for himself. The idea of someone coming alongside of you to lift you up, to bring you about your goodness. And now today I can speak of that in my life as a tremendous blessing, some tremendous friends, godly friends, wise friends, but that was not always the case. Like maybe some of you, I grew up here, I went to Ocean View High School, I graduated. I got into a college called Azusa Pacific, but our family couldn't afford it. So we decided to stay home. I'd stay home, I'd go to Orange Coast for 2 years. The problem was all my friends went away to college. All my friends dispersed. And so I was alone here, trying to refigure out friendships, trying to refigure out relationships. And it was lonely, and it was painful. I started dating who's now my wife, which was great. But there was still, even though we had a dating relationship, the presence of a friend, the presence of a good friend was still missing. And so there's a proverb we're gonna look at today that I began to pray. And I prayed it for 2 years. I prayed that God would answer this prayer of bringing into my life a friend that would be closer than a brother. And in the most unique way, God answered that prayer. He became my college roommate. He became the best man in my wedding. Since then, we've watched our kids be born. We've grown up together. We've been there for each other's family to this day. We still have this friendship. Not that we agree on everything, but we're ruthlessly for each other. There's this rugged commitment to each other. And so I want us to pursue today what the Proverbs say about friendship. Here's a big idea that we're gonna explore today. What Proverbs says is that a wise friend offers perspective and protection. That a wise friend offers perspective and protection. So I want you to listen to the Proverbs today, and I want you to try to do 2 things. So first, as you listen today, try to do this. Try to, in your mind, don't write these down in case someone's sitting next to you and realizes they're not on your list. But I want you to think of 1, 2, or 3 friends, okay? Think of some friends that you have in your life, and I want you to try to filter things through the friendships that you have. And ask the question, do the friendships I have, do they fit under this? As I filter them through these Proverbs, are my friendships characterized by what the Proverbs say? Now, but don't just do that. Don't just look out. Look within. And ask yourself, am I becoming that kind of friend? If I was on the list, if I was someone's 1, 2, or 3 friends that they listed, would I be on that? Would I be that kind of friend for them? So we're gonna look at a proverb, the first proverb. We're gonna look at a number of proverbs, but let me first help you see something. A wise friend is a divine gift. Is a divine gift. This is the first thing I want us to see today, that one of the things that we have to see, I forgot to tell you, turn to Proverbs 18 first. Go to Proverbs 18 first, because otherwise this first point won't help you. Turn to Proverbs 18. I don't know what page it's on. Someone can yell it out, but Proverbs 18, okay? So we're gonna be in Proverbs 18, and we're gonna move around a few, but this first proverb is gonna reveal something, this cooperation of God and us. But we wanna see that a wise friend is a divine gift. A divine gift. So Proverbs does something. It teaches us this, that there is an initiative by God. God will lead us in wisdom. He'll guide us, but there is human responsibility. We have to decide if we're going to walk, if we're going to live in the wisdom. And so God can show us someone that can be in our lives, that can be a divine gift, but we also have to participate in it with them. And so there's this 2 things are working together. So here's this proverb I prayed for 2 years. Proverbs 18:24. One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Some of you may have, the translation may say, there are friends who pretend to be friends, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Some friendships are marked by just wanting something from someone. There really is no sense of investment it's not reciprocal. There's no sense of cost, a willingness to pay a cost of true friendship. And the proverb says you have to be on guard for this, that there are friendships marked by, if we look at this proverb, we see it's marked by intensity and intimacy. Intensity and intimacy. Now we're gonna come back to this idea in a few moments, but think about this. There's a friend that can be closer to you than even family. We used to live downtown Huntington on 9th and Olive. So we're like 2 blocks from the beach, 2 blocks from Main Street. And I remember one night, my brother, who's 6 years younger than me, he comes running into the house. He'd been downtown, and I'm like, dude, what's up? And he begins to tell me this story, how he was going past this group of guys. They kind of made eyes, all this kind of stuff, and they chased him. They were gonna beat him up. Now, I'm sure Scotty had something to do with it. I won't put that past him, but my brother instinct was, well, I'll say this. My brother instinct was not to love my enemy, to turn the other cheek, or any of those things that should have happened in my new life in Jesus. My honest reaction, I remember thinking this, was to go in my room, grab my baseball bat, and to head down and find out who these guys were. Now, thankfully, that didn't happen, but that instinct, that impulse to protect your family is something that we can relate to. And Proverbs says that you can actually find someone, there's a friend, there's a divine gift, there's a gift of a friend who will stick with you like this, who will be on your side, closer even than that desire. This was so illustrated so well in a story I was reading about these two men who grew up together. One was named Jim, the other Phil. They did everything together, high school together, college together. They even enlisted in the Marines together. And they found themselves fighting together in World War II. And in one battle, they found themselves under intense gunfire, bombing. It was so intense that the commanding officer said to them, called to them to retreat. And as they began to retreat, Jim noticed that Phil was not with them. And so as they got to a safe place, he asked his commanding officer if he could go back, if he could find Phil. And the officer said, no, that would be a suicide mission. It's not safe. You cannot do it. You have to leave your friend. He tried as best he could to obey the order, but with his heart pounding, he took off. He ran into the gunfire, calling out, Phil, Phil. A short time later, the platoon saw him hobbling across the field, carrying this limp body with him. When he got to a safe spot, the commanding officer lit into him. I told you what a stupid idea this was. Your friend is dead. There was nothing you could do. It was a waste of your time. And Jim responded to him. He said, no, sir, you're wrong. He said, I got there just in time because before he died, he looked at me and he said, I knew you'd come for me. There are friends who pretend to be friends. And there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Do you have someone like this in your life? Are you someone like this in someone's life? This is a divine gift that we can receive. This is a divine gift that we can be for someone. Now, with those kind of friends, two things I want you to see that wise friends, we said, offer. First, perspective. Wise friends offer perspective. So one of the key themes that we'll see in the book of Proverbs is this idea of, if you're wise, you will not resist correction. You will embrace when people are able to help you figure out a better path to go on. Good friends bring correction in our life to help us from repeating past mistakes, and they train us to recognize things before they happen. So listen, if you want to skip a couple pages over, Proverbs 27 has two proverbs in it that speak to this. Proverbs 27:6 says this, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. The proverb says, notice, that a real friend is not gonna just simply flatter you. That when someone has come in, when you can share a heart with someone, that you learn to speak truth in love. You learn there's a way to both to give and to receive correction, perspective. A famous proverb is a few verses down, verse 17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. This picture, of course, right, of things rubbing against each other, there's friction. There's pressure. But without it, you become dull and useless. We need We need friends in our life who have our best interests in mind, who help us embrace God's path, his path of wisdom. So there's a practice that the God's church has practiced for centuries. We call it guidance. In the Quaker tradition, it's called a clearness committee. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, a man named Parker Palmer, who grew up in the Quaker tradition, talks about this, where he was offered a position to be the president of an educational institution. He was convinced it was a perfect position for him, but to honor his tradition, he assembled a clearness committee to practice this discipline of guidance. 12 friends who would listen and who would ask questions. They wouldn't so much give advice as they would empathetically listen to what he was experiencing and try with him to discern God's leading. As they formed together, and prepared for that 3 hours together, they asked all kinds of initial questions. Most of them were pretty easy. And then one question came. Parker, what would you like most about being president? Here's what he writes. He said, the simplicity of that question loosed me from my head, lowered me into my heart. I remember pondering for at least a full minute before I could respond. Then very softly and tentatively, I started to speak. Well, I would not like having to give up my writing and my teaching. I would not like the politics of the presidency, never knowing who your real friends are. I would not like having to glad hand people I do not respect simply because they have money. I would not, gently but firmly, the person who had asked the question interrupted him and say, may I remind you that I asked you what you would most like? He said he responded impatiently, yes, I'm getting to that. And he resumed, and he continued down this path. And so once again, the questioner called him back to the original question. And he says, but this time I felt compelled to give the only honest answer I could give. And I said in the smallest voice I could possess, I guess what I'd like most is getting my picture in the paper with the word president under it. He said, I was sitting with seasoned Quakers who knew that though my answer was laughable, my mortal soul was clearly at stake. They did not laugh at all. And they went into a long and serious silence, a silence in which I could only sweat and inwardly groan. And finally, my questioner broke the silence with a question that cracked all of us up and cracked me open. Parker, he said, can you think of an easier way to get your picture in the paper? He says, by then it was obvious even to me that my desire to be president was much more to do with my ego. And so he said that as the committee ended, he called the school, he withdrew his name from consideration. And he writes, had I taken the job, it would have been very bad for me, a disaster for the school. That story I read probably about 15 plus years ago, and it has stuck with me so powerfully that when I found myself at significant crossroads, I found myself calling together my most trusted friends to say, will you help me discern where's God calling me? Help me discern what is God inviting me to? And allowing them to ask questions and listen to me with empathy and to feel the struggle with me. And I can't even tell you how much it's meant to be able to do that with them. What are you facing right now that requires godly wisdom? Is there a decision that's before you? Is there a burden that's overwhelming you? Is there a crossroads in life that you don't know what to do next? Who's going to help you discern what is good and right and true? Who is going to walk in this with you and give you perspective, biblical perspective? Who will help you be an authentic follower of Jesus in this moment? Wise friends offer perspective. but they also offer us protection. Wise friends offer us protection. Wise friends are the ones who are there when we really need them. And this is what the Proverbs come back to again and again, is that in these times of trial, of adversity, of pain, of confusion, you are blessed when you have a wise friend to help you navigate this. Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. That there are times in our lives that are too big for us. And the Proverbs say, oh, how good it is when you have a brother who will stand in this with you. When you have a friend who will not run from you, but will run in with you. Some call this the 3 a.m. friend. Who's that person when all hell breaks loose at 3 a.m.? Who do you call? King Solomon wrote much about the wisdom in Proverbs, but he also wrote about wisdom in a book called Ecclesiastes that comes after this book in the Bible. And he says this, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If they fall down, they can help each other up, but pity those who fall and have no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm, but how can 1 keep warm alone? Though 1 may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. There is wisdom, there is protection when you have a wise friend. Some of you might remember a few years back, there was a story just locally here, Mission Viejo. 2 women, Ann and Debbie, they were friends, they were mountain biking in the hills, and surprisingly, a 110-pound mountain lion jumped out of the bushes and grabbed Anne and pulled her off the bike. It gripped her by the face and began to drag her into the bushes. And her friend, Debbie, jumped off her bike, grabbed hold of her legs, and just held on with all she had. Other riders came along, they threw rocks, they tried to scare the cat away, but it was so persistent, it would not let go. But more persistent was Debbie's tenacity. She kept just saying, I'm not gonna let go. I'm not gonna let go. I will never let go. Her rescue came from a friend who just said, I will not let go. I will not let go. I will never let go, while battling a lion. I don't know what 110-pound lion has jumped on you, but do you have someone? Do you have a friend who you know who's in the jaws of a beast right now, and you need to grab a hold of them, and you need to reassure them in this time, I will not let go, I will never let go. I am in this with you to the end. A wise friend offers protection. Now, when we think about these elements of friendship, perspective and protection, intensity and intimacy, Scriptures reveal that there is no greater friend than Jesus himself. On the last night of Jesus' life, he called together his disciples and invited them to share in the Passover meal together. Now, it might seem somewhat normal to us, but we probably should consider at least this, that what he was asking is, what he knew was his last night on this earth was, I want this time with you. And so it was a big ask. Can I ask, whatever your plans would have been with your families, can I have that time with you? And so they assembled together in an upper room. And Jesus began to demonstrate to them what they meant to him. As tradition would go, before a meal, their feet would be washed, but there was no servant there. So Jesus took off his outer garment, wrapped a towel around his waist, and began to do the most humble thing imaginable, the lowest servant in the room would have done. He began to wash each of their feet. And then he began to speak about what was to come. He knew, he prepared them for his death. He comforted them in their trouble. He shared not only that meal with them, but he introduced them to a meal that they would continue on even to this day, a meal in which they could remember what he was about to do for them. And he spoke to them. He said to them these things. He said, "Greater love has no one than this, but to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because servants do not know what their master's business. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything that I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you." He loved them, he warned them, he prepared them. In their own intensity of friendship, we see pictures of it. Peter saying, "I'll never betray you." Jesus saying, "Peter, you're gonna let me down, but I'm gonna restore you, and when I restore you, will you take care of your friends?" John, we read how John was, they would eat the meal kind of reclined on an elbow, and we see at part of the meal that John he's leaning back, his head against Jesus' chest. He would describe himself as the one in whom Jesus loves. This friendship, this life together. And in Jesus, we see what true friendship really is. Because Jesus would go from that night and he would take on something that you and I have zero power to defeat. You and I have no power over sin. We have no power over death. We have no power over hell. We have no power over the devil and evil of this world. And so Jesus pushed us aside. He stood in the way, and he, with his own life, he took on sin and death and hell and evil, and he defeated each of those. He removed the power those things have over you if you will find your life in him. And he says to you, I don't want you to be a servant. I want you to be a friend. I want life with you now, and I want it forever. And so he invites us into a life with him. Do you have a friend in Jesus? See, in him we learn how to lay down our lives, how to give up selfish ambition and vain conceit. We learn how to consider others better than ourselves. It's only in him that we really learn what friendship is. He invites us into a life with him. Do you have that? So I want to just give you a closing question. We started with an evaluation. Do your friendships match up? We asked you to evaluate your friendships, the kind of friends you have and the kind of friend you are. Every week, what we've seen is that we're hearing something about wisdom, but we're wise if we do it. What do you need to do in your friendships? And how can you lean into your friend Jesus? As we close in prayer, I just want to invite you to this. Those of you who have friends who don't know Jesus yet, they need you to be like Jesus around them. They need to see, what they need most from you is to see who Jesus really is. Those of you who are in life groups here in our church, can I invite you to be, to learn, to gain perspective from each other, to be authentic and transparent, empathetic. Man, we had such a good life group with our guys yesterday. I was so blessed listening to them. The way that they saw the challenges we were talking about, the honesty that they had in front of each other. And I just left thinking I was just so thankful for this group of guys. Maybe this is a good way we live out this week. Do your friends know how important they are to you? Maybe it's important this week to reach out to them and to say, I just so value our friendship. But let's pray. Let's pray. Lord, am I being the kind of friend that you are calling me to be. As we bow together, I just want to give you a moment of silent prayer. You may need to say, Jesus, I don't have friendship with you yet, but I would like that. And so would you come in my life? Would you forgive my sin? Would you begin a relationship with me today that would allow me to be your friend, to learn from you, to be loved by you today and every day throughout eternity? Would you come into my life? If that's your heart, would you just tell him that? If your heart's filled with loneliness, pray Proverbs 18, saying, Lord, I know there's a friend out there. Would you bless me in that way? But maybe pray too, Lord, you can help me become that kind of friend. Would you help me become that kind of friend in the days ahead? Let me just give you a moment of silence, and then Mitch will lead us into a final song.